If you own a home in York Region or South Simcoe, the 2026 housing forecast you see on the news is likely wrong for you, and acting on it could cost you thousands of dollars. And if you are deciding whether to sell in 2026, misunderstanding the forecast does not just affect timing, it quietly affects your leverage. Most forecasts you see on the news or other YouTube channels are driven by the downtown condo market. And if you apply that math to a detached home or family home in the York Region or South Simcoe, you are drawing the wrong conclusion for your home. In the past month, I've reviewed the major bank forecasts from RBC, TD, and BMO. I've looked at national commentaries and compared it to what is actually happening statistically on the ground in our local communities. What I've found is a growing disconnect between the headline narrative and the reality facing homeowners and buyers here. In this video, I want to walk you through why the GTA forecast is not your forecast and to identify what is different about York Region and South Simcoe and how to think about 2026 if you're considering buying, selling, or moving up. This is not about being optimistic or creating fear. It's about providing you with clarity. Now, the major banks are largely aligned in their outlook for 2026. Ontario is expected to move through a prolonged adjustment period. RBC points to some of the steepest price declines nationally, whereas TD describes Ontario as one of the few provinces likely to see price contraction in 2026. BMO uses phrases like longer slump and extended weakness. Here's what I feel is the important part. They're not wrong, but they are incomplete for our market. These forecasts are overwhelmingly driven by the downtown Toronto market, and that market is under real pressure. Sales to new listing ratios for condos are sitting in the low 30s. A large portion of the pandemic era price gains found has now disappeared, and there are still tens of thousands of condo units under construction across the GTA scheduled for completion in 2026. That supply truly matters. Mistake happens when the entire GTA is treated as though it behaves like the downtown Toronto market. That assumption does not hold for detached and family-oriented homes that we predominantly have in the York Region and South Simcoe. That sounds fine in theory, but it does not feel that way on the ground here. So what does it feel like in this market? On paper, the forecast sounds measured. They talk about modest declines, slow recovery, and stabilization. And technically, those statements are not wrong. But when you are working and actually in this market, that is not how it feels really. Buyers are not sitting around waiting for the perfect number. They are worried about making the wrong move, buying too soon, and stretching too far or locking themselves into something they might regret later. Whereas sellers are feeling something similar from the other side. They sense that the market has shifted, but they are unsure how to respond. They do not want to rush, but they also do not want to miss their window. What we're seeing right now is not fear. It is simply hesitation. And hesitation does not mean people have left the market. It means they are moving more strategically and carefully. In York Region and South Simcoe, that shows up in very practical ways. Buyers are taking longer, comparing more options, and being far more selective and discerning of their home purchases. Homes are still selling, but fewer offers are being written. Pricing and preparation matter more than they did even a year ago. That is why extreme predictions rarely match what really happens in the marketplace. Most real decisions in markets like this are made in the middle, not in panic and not in blind optimism. That middle ground is where 2026 will be decided. And this is where the type of home we are talking about really starts to matter. Not all housing behaves the same way, even inside the same region. While condos remain oversupplied, detached homes in the York Region and South Simcoe are still structurally scarce. Even conservative institutional forecasts acknowledge that single detached housing has shown more resilience. So the question is, what does this mean? Condo buyers often face dozens of comparable options. Detached buyers may only see 2-3 homes that truly fit their needs. So here's where scarcity changes behavior of the buyer. It allows prices to soften without collapsing. It increases the negotiation power of the buyer without it being with panic. And it makes precision and preparation far more important than timing. So this scarcity can still protect the seller, but only when the pricing and presentation reflects today's buyer's market, not yesterday's seller's market. So in this region, this is not a crash. This is a rebalancing with a little bit of friction along the way. And this is also why some of the biggest headlines get misunderstood. What does that actually mean to us locally? Immigration comes up a lot in forecasts, and it is often applied too broadly in my mind. Yes, immigration targets are being adjusted, and yes, that affects housing demand, but it does not affect every type of housing in the same way. Most new arrivals to this country often rent first. They tend to stay closer to urban centers for the infrastructure, and when they buy, it is usually condos or townhomes to start. York Region and South Simcoe are not typically entry-level housing markets for the immigration sector. They are destination markets, places people move into once they are more established with growing families or looking for space and stability. That means change to immigration targets tend to impact the condo and downtown market far more than detached family housing. In some cases, affordability pressure closer to the core actually pushes demand outward rather than eliminating it. So this is why immigration headlines can be technically true, but still misleading if you apply them to the wrong community. So this is where it's helpful if you start to zoom out and understand the GTA as a whole. And when you look at what actually shapes demand over time, this is where infrastructure comes into play. Markets move in cycles. Rates go up and go down. Forecasts change year over year. But when I sit down with clients who made good decisions 10, 15 years ago, in most cases, it was never because they timed the market perfectly. It was because they understood where demand was quietly being supported, even when the market felt uncertain. That is what infrastructure does. In York Region and South Simcoe, things like GO Transit expansion, the Bradford bypass, and long-term growth planning in areas like East Gwillimbury and Bradford are not proposals or ideas. They are already funded, approved, and construction is underway. These projects do not create instant price spikes. That's not the point. What they do is gradually change how people live, commute, and choose where they want to be. And those shifts matter far more over the 10, 20 years than whatever the market happens to be doing in this quarter. That is why 2026 is not really about chasing appreciation. It's about positioning, especially if you're planning to make a move you plan to live with for a while. When the market is quieter and less emotional, people have more space to make thoughtful decisions. You are then not reacting to panic or headline. You are choosing based on how a location actually fits your life and your long-term plan. You do not need certainty to make a smart move. You need clarity about what will still matter to you and your family after the cycle passes. So let me bring this back to real decisions. If you're thinking about selling in 2026, the largest shift to understand is that pricing precision matters more than optimism. Homes are still selling, but they are the ones that are prepared properly and positioned realistically. When sellers try to test the market, it usually leads to more time on the market, followed by a price adjustment and a loss of leverage that is hard to recover. If you are buying, there is more room to negotiate than there has been in years, but scarcity has not disappeared. Good homes still attract attention. The advantage right now is being patient without being passive, but waiting without a plan quietly erodes your leverage. For people trying to move up, this market is often easier to navigate than a fast-moving one. Softer conditions tend to compress price gaps, which means strategy matters more than timing. And if you're looking at real estate purely as an investment, the math has changed. Short-term cash flow is tighter and quicker appreciation is not the story. The opportunities that still make sense are grounded in long-term fundamentals, not speculation. The common thread through all of this is that 2026 is not a year to rush, but it is also not a year to drift or wait. The 2026 housing forecast you hear most often is not wrong, but it is incomplete. In the GTA, it is shaped by the downtown condo market, and that story does not reflect what's happening for many homeowners in the New York region and South Simcoe. If you are a homeowner, the most important question in 2026 is not whether price will go up. It is what waiting might quietly cost you in this market. The answer is different for every home, every street, and every price range. This is the work I do with my clients, translating market data into timing, pricing, and positioning decisions that protect leverage. No pressure, just clarity. Bye for now. Until the next time.